Okay, are we live now?
We are live on both. I think YouTube, we may be left with a blank screen for today, but at least you can see us on Facebook.
And I'm recording.
Okay, great.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start then. So today's program is sponsored by the Rutgers Immigration Law Society and the Rutgers Social Justice Scholars Know Your Rights Summit. And we have our speaker, Gisela Galindo from American Friends Service Committee. She's part of the VOCA team who works with victims of crime. And she's going to do a Know Your Rights presentation for us today for immigrants, including topics like what to do in case of an ICE raid or in case of contact with the police. And she will also be sharing with us information about COVID-19 resources for immigrants and undocumented persons in New Jersey. And at the end, we will have time for questions. So if you have a question, just leave it in the comments on our Facebook Live or on the YouTube Live, and we will try and answer those questions at the end of the panel. Okay, Stella, you can go ahead and take over.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And I am going to start. So, like Hope says, I work for a nonprofit. We are American Friends Service Committee, and our organizations represents provide legal services, immigration related to immigrants in New Jersey. And I'm gonna give you a little know your rights. And this is something that we have to keep in mind that it keeps changing, and that's why we have updated this presentation to the most recent changes. So the Department of Homeland Security was established after 9/11 in 2002, and it consists of three different sections. The USCIS, or U.S. Citizens and Immigration Services, is the department where people apply for affirmatively, and that means that people that are not detained. So when you apply for your green card, for naturalization, for a work authorization, depending on the different rules and eligibility grounds, and that is something that gets mailed to them. Immigration and Custom Enforcement is ICE, and this agency is the agency that has the authority to arrest an individual. And then Custom and Border Protection, or known also as CBP, is the agency that we all, when we come back before pre-COVID, when we were able to travel more than now, the people that you encounter when you come back into the United States. So knowing that this is how the immigration system is divided, then we're going to focus today on ICE. So who is at risk of being arrested by ICE? The law, according to the federal government, can deport anybody who is undocumented in the country, or even those that have a green card and are permanent residents or have a visa when they have a criminal conviction, so when they have committed a crime. Um, what do you do in the different scenarios where either ICE comes to your home, to your place of work, or in a public space? If you are in your home, the main thing that we tell people is, number one, that is they are not authorized to come into your home. You still, even if you're undocumented, have rights in the country, and one of them is the right to remain silent and the right to allow or not to allow someone to come into your home. So what they need in order for them to come into the house is a search warrant. And this is something that is very important to know because ICE officers usually use tricks like we are from the narcotic unit, or they dress up as police officers, or they tell you that they need to interview a possible witness of something that happened in your building or in your neighborhood. So unless they have a valid search warrant, which is the one signed by a judge, they cannot come into the house. And this is why our recommendation is to not open the door. If they said that they have anything, ask them to slide those documents from underneath so you can see them, or if you have a peephole, through the peephole that you can see if it's an actual search warrant. So do not open the door. You can tell them that you need to see it, and it's really important to know that you can ask them what is the who are they representing, like where, if they're the police or if they're not the police. But either way, you do not need to open the door. What is an ICE warrant? So something that they may show you can be just like a deportation order, something that has a picture of a person, and what it says is that that person is the one that has a deportation order, but does not give them any authority for them to either search your home or detain that person, unless, like we said, is signed by a judge. So this one is one that is an arrest warrant. So this one is just a removal order, a deportation order for the person. As you can see on the top, it says ICE, but
Hmm.
this is not an actual uh, search warrant. So here we can see the difference between a valid and an invalid one. The one that says valid, as you can see, comes from an actual court and is signed by a judge. The one that is not correct is just has the person's name, and it says that the person has to appear in court and because they have a deportation order, but is not signed by a judge. So this is the key of knowing the difference between when is something valid, and even if they have a valid signed search warrant signed by a judge, it has to be to a specific place or person. So if ICE comes to your home and they have that a valid search warrant, then the best advice that we give our clients is for the person that they're looking for to step outside, and later we'll play the video of what to do in that
I need them to
circumstance.
just not come over
But if
here
they don't have it, you do not have to
because I
open
can't
the
have them
door.
above my
Always
head.
remember that even opening a crack of the door gives them authorization to force themselves in. Um, so then we cannot emphasize enough that you need to make sure of what kind of warrant is the one that they bring and what each of them represents. Um, if they refuse to leave, then you can still, we always start telling people that if they're undocumented, they need to have a plan in place and a phone number for an attorney, a family safety plan that will go over that as well, so that if they do have one that's valid, then the rest of the family knows what steps to take. We have designed an organization, this Know Your Rights door hanger. So this one, in case of a panic and people get really nervous, you can keep these and we can have everybody in the house know that they do not need to open the door. And this is a reminder of what is it, what is a warrant, what it needs to specify. And then on the other side, it allows the person to put the phone numbers, important phone numbers in the home so that people know who to call in case of someone being detained. So just remember that an arrest warrant must specify the name of the person that they are looking for, the address where that person lives, and the person must be present in the home. If they are not present, all you can say is like that they're not present, and then you ask them if they could leave. If the agents do enter your house, you can just keep on repeating two things: that you have the right to remain silent, and that you do not consent to the search. So, if you tell them that you do not authorize them to enter and search your home, please do not sign any papers. That is the next advice. I will not sign any papers until I'm able to speak to an attorney. The main thing is to remain calm. And one thing that we also highlight is never to present documents that are fraudulent, or that belong to another person. So do not lie about your identity. Um, you have the right to speak to an attorney. Before you sign anything, please make sure, especially if you have had any contact with immigration in the past, either when you enter through the border or because you had an application filed or denied, make sure that you contact an attorney and request a copy of your folder. Those are files that immigration provides you a copy of for free. But it's good for anybody to know your complete immigration history. So the recommendation is do not sign anything, because ICE may try to get you to sign away the right to see an attorney or to see a judge, and then just to expedite your deportation. So, like I was telling you before, if you don't open the door, if the immigration agents stay around the house waiting for you to come outside, you should stay in your home. Do not leave and then start making preparations in case that you do get detained later in an open public space. It's always good to carry, especially for those people that do not speak English, to carry this Know Your Rights card with them. And this Know Your Rights just reminds you of your rights regardless of your status. So if you're stopped, you can hand the card to the officer, and this card will remind them that you will to remain silent and you refuse to answer any questions. So what happens if it's in a public space? So in a public space, our recommendation is always do not run. Make sure that you remain calm and that you ask them whether you're free to leave or not, and that you can still tell them that you can remain quiet and that you speak to until you speak to an attorney. And then the same thing, to not carry any documents that may have someone else's information, or that is not something, or if you carry, for example, some people have their passports or consular IDs, that would just expedite the process of deportation, because then now they know your country of origin. So what to do if your counter if immigration comes to your job place? So once again, we remind people that even in the workplace, there are certain areas that are designated as private and others that are designated as public space. So if in your space of work they have these places marked, then they can only go to what is considered public space unless the employer gives them authorization to enter.
Do you
So
like it?
if this happens, continue to work until someone tells you not to do that. You do not try to run away. You still have the right to remain silent. Don't offer information about yourself or your colleagues or coworkers about the immigration status of anyone. And then you don't have to offer the information to them, or separate yourselves into groups that they requested. You guys can stay in the center of the room and don't disperse, because this will be something that they use as a tactic to find out who's documented and not undocumented. Um, Always carry with you, if you have a valid immigration document. In some states, the states do not need the person to be documented for them to have a valid driver license. So get familiar with what county at a local or county or a state level, what kind of document you can obtain. Uh, all the documents that you carry can be used against you for your deportation proceedings. So don't carry papers from another person, or if you do have a valid green card or a work authorization, or you have an application pending. Some of the humanitarian relief applications take a long time, then it's always good to have those receipt notices with you. And then if you do have a valid green card or a work authorization, I always tell people to please keep the original in a safe place, and in your wallet carry a copy, because you don't want to lose it or leave it behind in a taxi or in a bus, and then that can be a problem for obtaining a new renewal application, especially now during COVID, that applications are taking just so much more time than before to process. If you are a parent or primary caregiver, or especially if there are children present when ICE comes to their home, then just make sure that you inform them that you are the sole caretaker of children under 18. They can exercise discretion and not detain you. Never present any identification that is fake or that belongs to another person, and do not lie to an immigration officer, because all that information can be used against you during the deportation proceedings. Uh, you can, if you can have a consultation with an attorney before, then that way you can be advised of what if there's any form of relief, it's always good to know what options the person has. If you think that you will forget what to say, it's always good with carry the Know Your Rights card with you and it's in English, so that reminds you of what rights you have and you can tell them that you wish to remain silent. Um, for anybody who gets detained or is at risk of detention and deportation because of being undocumented, it's always good to have an emergency plan. And by this, what we mean is meet with a lawyer, know what your benefits that you can qualify for are. If you have any medical needs, make sure that you have a list of what medicines and the doses that you take that. Make sure that childcare arrangements are made, especially for those parents who both parents are undocumented. You can designate here in the state of New Jersey, we can designate as a third party to care for the children if we're not at home. This doesn't give up your parental right. It's just like what would you need as a third party person to care for children that aren't yours. You have to make sure that the person is informed. It's a document that they sign in front of a notary accepting that responsibility. And then that person needs to know where the documents are, birth certificates, marriage certificates, passports. So financial needs also need to be explicitly what does the family want for the nuclear to happen if one of them is detained. So I know these conversations are really tough to have in our homes, but is necessary. How to advocate for a family member. If somebody is detained and qualifies for a bond, then how would the family put this money together? And then be aware of like know your emergency contacts by heart, because when you get detained you will have the chance to make a phone call, so know the attorney phone number by heart, know the relative that you will contact, and then that way everybody can have the plan ready. With the expansion of expedited removal, one thing that we recommend people is always to gather documents that establish that you've been in the United States for at least 2 years. And of course, because of the deportation, preferably documents that do not list the country of birth or citizenship, but country like it could be bank statements, it could be the tax records, it could be records that show that you've been in the U.S. Based on the current immigration system, if you've been in the country for 2 years, then they may or may not detain you, but it's good for you to have this with you. It's been a mixed bag of recommendations whether the person should carry them with them or not. But if the purpose of it is showing that you have been in the country for more than 2 years, then the recommendation would be to carry them with you. But then the next advice would be not to carry original, because if you need them later on for an important application, then if you lost them, you won't have them. So it's always good to keep that in mind. Now with this, we wanted to show one of the videos. Hope I'll give you that.
Okay. You want the We Have Rights video?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, I'm bringing it up. Okay. Right.
Samir's wife asked him to stop at the store on his way home from work to pick up groceries. While shopping, Samir noticed a man who seemed to be watching him. Was he paranoid? Probably, he thought. Samir's heart started racing when he saw a second man watching him outside the store. He moved deliberately toward his car, telling himself there was nothing to worry about. I'm totally being paranoid, he told himself. That's when he felt a forceful grip on his shoulder. Without identifying themselves, the two men began to bark questions at Samir. It was ICE. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Arrests like these happen every day, and they happen out of nowhere. It's scary, but remember, we have rights. If you are arrested by ICE, remain silent. Ask to speak to a lawyer even if you don't have one. If you witness ICE making an arrest, it is your right to document what you see by taking notes or videotaping. Do not interrupt the arrest, but you have the right to ask for identification and badge numbers. If you've been arrested, do not sign anything. Keep whatever information ICE gives you. They will have important information for your family. After ICE arrests you, they will likely take you to an ICE office and ask you more questions before starting a deportation case against you and deciding whether or not to send you to a detention facility. Remember, do not say anything without a lawyer present. You can ask to speak to a lawyer even if you don't have one. Within about a day, loved ones will be able to search for your location at the website included below. This is all scary, but remember, we have rights. Be sure that you and your loved ones are prepared for encounters with ICE and that you have a plan for what to do if one of you is arrested, including information about who you should call. If you are arrested by ICE, remember, you have rights. Remain silent. Ask to speak to a lawyer. Do not sign anything. If a loved one is arrested, you should be able to locate them at locator.ice.gov.
So one thing that I wanted to remind people is that those videos are from the ACLU and they have them in different languages. So it's always good to know that people can listen to them in other languages as well. So now we're going to move to the COVID-19 resources. For this, I wanted to make sure that people know that for these kind of benefits, it depends how the status of the person. So there's qualified and not qualified people, and these depends of a lot of things, and it can get very confusing. But one of the things, it depends on the immigration status of the person and the day that the person entered into the United States. Then each program has its own requirements. So that is something. Some of them ask you for work history, the length of residency in the state. If there's any income limits, they will let you know. So there's things that you may or may not qualify for. And then they depend state by state. So under the qualified immigrants, which are the people who have a green card, people who have the 2-year conditional green card, asylees, refugees, these are all immigrants that are considered qualified. Then, as you can see, it's also like the victims of human trafficking that had, or the U visa, which is also for victims of other crimes that have a determination that they've been awarded either deferred action or a prima facie order. Then the benefit qualification in New Jersey, it depends on the status of the person, like we said before, but these are some of the ones that are for qualified immigrants. So this is a SNAP, includes, like you can see, a SNAP, Medicaid, cash assistance. This is all for qualified immigrants. One of the things that we should highlight is that is the key to remember. Benefits that can turn into cash or that are cash benefits, they are going to be considered to what people called the public charge rule. That is what a lot of people who are applying for green cards are worried about. So if any of these benefits that are, most people are not eligible to receive them if they're not a qualified immigrant under the regulation, but this is what will affect people if they for to become a public charge. So the benefits that are included, like I said before, for the public charge policy are those that can are considered cash support for income maintenance or non-emergency Medicaid or housing assistance like Section 8, except when it's for children under 21. So even when it's considered public charge, there are some exceptions, and that's why everybody needs to make sure that they're aware of what those are. Um, these benefits are not included under the public charge policy. So there are excluded benefits, which are disaster relief, CHIP for the supplemental nutrition for women and infants, which is known as WIC, energy assistance, non-cash benefits, anything like that, it's something that will not be included. And then one thing that we always like to highlight with our clients, because a lot of people, when the public charge rule came into place, were really worried about not being able to apply for green card or for citizenship, or for those that had already a green card for citizenship. So one thing that is important to remember is that lawful permanent residents, so people who already have a green card, are not subject to the public charge. So people who are applying for citizenship, we don't have to worry about the public charge rule. And for those that do not have a green card yet, this is the list of categories of immigrants who are exempt from the public charge rule. So refugees, asylees, victims of domestic violence who are married to a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident, people who either are applying for a U visa as a victim of crime, or a T visa as someone that is trafficked, or somebody that is already granted that status. Then there's also other humanitarian basis statuses, which is people who are parole, or Cubans or Americans, or people who are granted NACARA. All these are people that are follow under the category of exemption, so they don't have to worry about the public charge rule. Then these here are programs available regardless of the person immigration status. So these are emergency Medicaid, charity care program, federal funded qualified health centers, which most of them provide dental services, mental health services, and medical services, immunization treatment, or short-term cash emergency for any disaster, food bank, pantries, soup kitchens. None of these are going to be considered a problem. Now during COVID, we've seen a lot of the Meals on Wheels programs. Those would not affect anyone. Violence and abusive prevention. The New Jersey has the New Jersey Hotline, which provides access to domestic violence for referrals or for crisis intervention. And this is the number to call in case you know anyone that's going through that situation. And then we also have family justice centers. So family justice centers are for victims of domestic violence who are seeking social and legal services when escaping the relationship. In New Jersey, we have one in Essex County and one in Union County. So that is something that is always good to keep in mind, to look for the family justice centers. So as you can tell, it's very complicated to know who qualifies for what, but at least know that there are benefits that anyone can access regardless of their status, and there's others who the person really needs to make sure before applying with a social worker that they qualified for. Thank you so much for your time, and you guys let me know if there are any questions. And then always I'll remind you that to make sure you watch the videos. If you need to print out the Know Your Rights card or the door hangers, it's always good to have and to be prepared.
I think we do have a couple questions.
Sure.
The first one, the document that you said to have in case ICE comes, does it have to be notarized?
Yes, for the family planning, it has to be notarized. Is the is actually it has to be one per child, and it needs both signatures. It's both parent signatures, and yes, it has to be. And I believe in New Jersey is you have to also put an expiration date for the document, so you have to make sure that you keep those documents up to date. The original remains with the person who will be the one taking care of the children, but everybody should also have one more copy somewhere with the important document. And there is this document, it has to be abide by a judge. So if you present it in for the CPP or a judge, it would hold importance. They will consider a valid document in
Drink
front
your
of
whole
those
thing.
authorities.
Okay. And if the children are in school and arrangements are not made, do the children go into foster care? So if you haven't made arrangements and you get deported, will your children go into foster care?
But this is something that is very controversial. And in New Jersey, I forget the rule. But yes, it's something very important to have in mind, and that's why we emphasize the family need to have a plan. But if you have at a school the emergency contact numbers, that would be the list that the school first goes to. So it's always good to know who you have in the emergency contact list for the kids, because that would be the person that they contact when the parents are in there. And then that would be a good idea to have somebody besides the parents to be listed, so that in the case that happens, that would be the person that the children are given to. And if that is the person that is in the document that we encourage parents to have, then it would be the same person, and that person needs to be aware of the responsibility. Like I mentioned, it does not make the parents lose their rights. It's just a plan in place while the parents are released, or even if they're sent back to their home countries, then to know what to do with the children.
Okay. And the last question is kind of a loaded question. Are there any ways to become a lawful permanent resident after coming here illegally?
Immigration, there's a lot of like maybes, and that is something that depends of a lot of things. So the best advice for that person would be to either, consult with an attorney, make sure that you look for an attorney or an accredited representative in the list of the attorneys, New Jersey Bar Association or the EOIR system for accredited representatives, so that you know that where you're going is someone reliable. Avoid notary fraud. In the United States, it's not like in most of the Latin American countries. Notaries do not have the authority to give you legal advice. They are just certifying that the person that is in front of them is the person signing a document. So do not accept legal advice from a notary. Look for an attorney or an accredited representative that can provide you with a legal advice. And sadly, immigration law has not changed since 1996. So there's a lot of things that have not changed. And that's why we have a lot of undocumented people, because there is very limited ways on how a person can obtain their status.
Mhm. I think that was all the questions that we had for today. But thank you so much for sharing with us.
Not a problem. Thank you.
And for the rest of our series on Know Your Rights, we will be having our next panel, I believe, next week on the 14th of November, will be regarding LGBT rights in healthcare. So check back in with our Facebook page and our YouTube live channel to get in on that. Oh, it's not LGBT in healthcare, it will be wills and estates. So we will be having a session on how to prepare your own will for when you pass away, making sure that everything is taken care of. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Gisela. And that's it for today.
Thank you. Bye.